Someone left a comment a few weeks back that I haven't been able to stop thinking about. They said they'd switched to whole wheat bread and brown rice years ago. Smaller portions, balanced plate, vegetables with every meal, everything their doctor had told them to do, and their blood sugar after eating was still doing something they couldn't explain, still spiking, still leaving them tired and foggy and just off for hours afterward. They couldn't figure out what they were doing wrong. They weren't doing anything wrong with the food. They were doing something wrong with the order. So here's what we're going to cover. First, why blood sugar after 65 is a fundamentally different problem than it was in your 40s or 50s. The rules changed. Most people don't know that, and it matters more than almost anything else I'll say today. Then, the exact sequence. What to eat first, what to eat last, and what that order alone does to your blood sugar peak. No food changes, no elimination, just sequence. And finally, one more thing you can do to the rice and bread itself before it ever touches your plate that changes how your body processes it entirely. None of this requires buying anything. None of it requires giving anything up. It just requires doing one thing differently, starting tonight if you want to. Here's what most people don't realize about blood sugar after 65. It is not the same problem it was 10 years ago. The body's ability to handle a blood sugar spike deteriorates with age, and it deteriorates in several ways at once. Muscle mass drops. That matters because muscle is where a large portion of the glucose from a meal gets absorbed and stored. Less muscle means less of that capacity. What used to get cleared from your bloodstream quickly now stays elevated longer. Insulin sensitivity drops too. The cells that used to respond quickly to insulin's signal, take in this glucose, clear it out, start responding more slowly, which means even a modest spike hangs around longer than it should. And here's the number that stops most people cold. According to the CDC and the Mayo Clinic, 50% of adults over 65 have prediabetes, 1 in 2, the majority, and most of them have no idea. Because prediabetes doesn't always announce itself. It shows up quietly, as fatigue after meals, as that foggy feeling in the afternoon, as legs that feel heavy, as tingling in the feet that comes and goes. Things that are easy to chalk up to age. This is the part most people miss. Those symptoms aren't separate problems. They're the same problem, blood sugar that's been running too high, too often, for too long. And here's what that does over time if nothing changes. Every time blood sugar spikes and stays elevated, it damages the small blood vessels that feed your nerves. The ones in your feet and legs go first, which is why the tingling starts there. That's the early signal most people ignore. Then quietly, over years, the damage moves inward. The vessels feeding the kidneys, the ones behind the eyes, eventually the arteries closer to the heart, all from the same process, working through the same meals, while the person eating those meals had no idea it was accumulating. I want you to think about something specific, not in the abstract, but specifically, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, driving yourself to your own appointments, walking out to the mailbox and back without your feet feeling strange underneath you, waking up and having your mind be clear by the time you've finished your coffee. I hear from people all the time who've lost these things quietly, not from one event, but from years of blood sugar spikes that nobody explained how to manage, and almost every one of them says the same thing. I didn't realize this was connected. It doesn't have to go that way. So let's get into it. Researchers at Weill Cornell Medical College ran a study, published in the journal Diabetes Care, where they gave people with type 2 diabetes the exact same meal on different days, same food, same portions. The only thing that changed was the order in which they ate it. On one day, they started with the carbohydrates, bread and rice first, then protein, then vegetables. On another day, they flipped it. Vegetables and protein first, carbohydrates last. Then they measured blood sugar at 30 minutes, 60 minutes, and 120 minutes after eating. The difference was not subtle. When protein and vegetables went first, blood sugar was 29% lower at 30 minutes, 37% lower at 60 minutes, 17% lower at 2 hours. Same meal, same person, different day. The only variable was the sequence, 37% on the same food. A follow-up study looked at people with prediabetes, the group that's right on the edge, which remember is half of everyone over 65. Eating protein and vegetables before carbohydrates reduced their glucose peak by more than 40%. and an earlier version of the research found a 54% reduction in the blood sugar peak in people with type 2 diabetes. 54%, without changing a single ingredient. So what's actually happening? Why does order matter this much? When you eat fiber-rich vegetables first, the fiber coats the lining of your small intestine. It physically slows down how quickly the carbohydrates, the bread, the rice, get absorbed later. Think of it like laying down a speed bump before the glucose rush arrives. And when you eat protein first, your body releases a hormone that slows digestion and signals your pancreas to prepare. It's actually the same hormonal pathway that some of the newer diabetes medications work on. So by the time the carbs arrive, your body is already primed to handle them. The bread and rice don't change. Your body's response to them does. Now here's how this actually works at a meal, because I want to be practical, not theoretical. You sit down. You start with your salad, your cooked vegetables, your broccoli, your green beans, whatever you're having. You eat that first, completely or mostly, before you touch the bread or rice. Then you eat your protein, your chicken, your fish, your eggs, your beans. Then, and only then, you eat the starchy carbohydrate. That's it. That's the sequence. 10 minutes between the vegetables and the carbs makes it even more effective, according to one of the studies. But even without the gap, just eating in that order, the impact on blood sugar is measurable, consistent, and immediate. And this connects back to part 2. Remember the fatigue, that heavy, foggy feeling in the afternoon that so many people over 65 deal with. A significant portion of that is the blood sugar crash that follows a spike. Flatten the spike, and the crash flattens with it, which means the afternoon energy drain, the need for a nap before you can function, that's not inevitable either. That's a downstream effect of sequence. Okay, so, the second thing. When you cook rice or bread and eat it hot and fresh, straight from the pot, straight from the toaster, the starch inside is fully open, swollen, soft, easy for your digestive enzymes to break apart quickly, which means the glucose gets into your bloodstream fast. High spike, quick hit. But something interesting happens when you cook rice and then let it cool in the refrigerator overnight. The starch molecules rearrange. They pack into tighter structures that your digestive enzymes struggle to break down as efficiently. Scientists call this resistant starch because it resists digestion. And when starch resists digestion, the glucose enters your bloodstream more slowly. Lower spike, longer, steadier curve. A study published in the journal Nutrition and Diabetes looked at 32 patients who ate the same white rice on 2 separate occasions. One portion freshly cooked, one portion cooked the day before, refrigerated overnight, and then reheated. The cooled and reheated rice produced a significantly lower blood sugar peak. Not a tiny difference. A measurable, consistent reduction in how high blood sugar climbed and how long it stayed elevated. Now, I want to be straight with you here because I don't like overstating things. The cooled rice finding is real, and it's been replicated, but the effect size varies depending on the type of rice and the person eating it. It is not going to do what the food order strategy does. That 37% reduction from eating in the right sequence, that's the bigger lever. This is the secondary one, a useful one, but secondary, still worth knowing. Because the best part is this: the resistant starch survives reheating. You're not eating cold rice out of the fridge. You cook it the night before, refrigerate it, and warm it up the next day exactly like you normally would. The structure that formed during cooling stays largely intact even after the heat goes back on. For bread, the same principle applies when you toast it. Toasting changes the starch structure in a similar direction, though less dramatically than overnight cooling does for rice. If you're having toast with breakfast, you're already getting some of this effect. So cook your rice the night before or in the morning. Refrigerate it. Reheat it at mealtime. And when you sit down, vegetables and protein go on the fork first. The rice goes last. 2 changes. Neither of them requires a different grocery list. And combined, a lower starting spike from the cooled rice and a flattened peak from the food order, you are giving your body a genuinely different experience from the same meal you've been eating for years. One more thing. And this one takes 10 minutes. After you eat, your muscles are the primary place excess glucose gets absorbed and cleared from the blood. When you move those muscles shortly after a meal, you activate that clearing process. The glucose has somewhere to go instead of sitting in the bloodstream. A short walk after eating, 10-15 minutes is one of the most consistently supported tools for managing blood sugar after a meal. Not a power walk, not exercise, a slow, easy walk around the block, around the house if you need to. The point isn't intensity. The point is that your muscles are awake and working at the exact moment they're most useful for pulling glucose out of the bloodstream. Combine this with what we covered in part 3. Vegetables first, protein second, carbs last. Spike already reduced by up to 37% before you've even stood up from the table. Then you take a short walk and give your muscles the signal to start clearing what's left. You've now hit the same blood sugar problem from 2 directions in one meal, which brings this full circle. Remember what brought us here, the person in that comment who was doing everything right and still couldn't figure out why their numbers were off, why their energy crashed every afternoon, why their legs felt heavy by evening. None of that was a mystery, it was just sequence, and nobody had ever explained it to them. Blood sugar problems after 65 don't require dramatic solutions. They require precise ones. The body at this age isn't broken, it's just less forgiving of the order and timing it was always somewhat sensitive to. Give it the right sequence, and it responds. The research on this is clear. Pick one thing from today. Start with dinner tonight. See how you feel in an hour, then in 2. Because the afternoon fog, the heavy legs, the energy that drops out from under you, those aren't fixed by willpower. They're fixed by information, and you have it now. Subscribe if this was useful. There's more where this came from, and I'll see you in the next one.